Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. I'd like to welcome you and the non-Muslims watching to another episode of Answering Anti-Islam. Before watching this episode, I recommend checking out episode 4.5, and that episode is called Doing the Research. I'll throw a link into it in the description, along with a link to the transcript. You should watch that first to see basically more outlandish claims about Islam, and the ones that I'm going to mention today are very mild in comparison to one of my favorite websites, religionofpeace.com. When I had debunked the religionofpeace.com in episode 4.5, it was rather amusing because they trust sources on things that they want to trust them on, and then if a source says something they don't like, then they don't trust that source. And that seems kind of contradictory to me, especially in a religious realm. They quote a lot of Islamic historians who came ages after Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and as well as the Sahaba, so it's really hard to trust that kind of a source. Recently, I was browsing our Quora space when I found some spam comments pointing to a particular website called Expose Islam Today. While it is not quite the magnum opus of disinformation known as thereligionofpeace.com, it has a lot of what I often see in one place. In terms of the material I'm using, I am indeed cherry-picking certain topics for brevity. Most of the arguments on this website have very simple retorts. I also have no idea who the author of this website is, as there is no attribution. So I've simply chosen to use the word author and the pronoun he to make this writing easier. The author is also clearly Christian, and I will be using the dogma of their faith as well in my arguments. The first thing I read on this website was a letter to the Muslims that states, and I quote, "Do you know there is more proof that aliens exist than Allah does? Think about it!" Exclamation point. Nobody has ever seen Allah or had a conversation with him. Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was supposedly the best of mankind, but Allah did not communicate with him directly. Instead, he sent an angel, Jibril, to give him revelations. Here we see one of the biggest mistakes Christians make when talking about Allah. Allah is not exclusively an Islamic God, or exclusively the concept of the, if we're going to call it that, exclusively the concept of the Islamic God. Rather, the word Allah in Arabic means the concept of God as it does in any other language, simply a supreme being. There's really no difference between that and Gott in German, or Dio, or any, it all means the same thing. When foreigners come to the United States, or I guess, let's make it even better, when Arabs come to the United States, they say the word God when speaking to people who speak English, right? And when they use the word God in English, it doesn't mean the Islamic version, if you will, of God, or the Islamic view of God, right? Yeah, nor does Allah. Incidentally, Arabic-speaking Christians and Jews would use the word Allah to mean God too. So in this case, the author just blasphemed in their own religion. Great work. Next, in the same work, we see, quote, "All of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam supposed miracles took place in the middle of the night with no witnesses. Yet in Islam, you need 4 witnesses to prove rape." Talk about a false premise, folks. Actually, you don't need 4 witnesses to prove rape. There is precedent in Islamic jurisprudence that the word of the woman is enough, especially in light of other evidence such as injuries. Here we have an excellent example of needing to know what you're talking about before saying things against it. I often tell those who are anti-Islam to do research from Islamic sources because it can help their arguments. And thus far, apparently, they haven't really listened. The letter continues to make subjective claims about Christians versus Muslims, and the last thing I will touch on is the claim the Bible, used in this context to mean both the Old Testament, Tanakh, and New Testament, was never corrupted. Of course it was corrupted. Scribes not only made innocent mistakes, but also inserted their own ideas into the Bible over time, thus the appearance of the Trinity in the modern Bible, a concept essentially created by the Catholic Church much after the lifetime of Jesus, alayhi salam. That in and of itself is proof of corruption. The other obvious corruptions are in the way they try to tie in material that was never meant to be together. The books in the Bible were originally individual works, and they were just slammed together and altered to tie in common themes. Another claim on this website, which happens to be my personal favorite, is that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam died of poisoning. And there's a few reasons why this is my favorite, especially the poisoning part because it doesn't really come up later. But yeah, here we go. The Quran says, "And if he, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, had forged a false saying concerning us," and this is Allah speaking, "we, as in Allah, we surely should have seized him by his right hand or with power and might, and then certainly should have cut off his life artery," and we're just going to call that the aorta, right? Okay, and this particular translation is contributed to Khan. Now, if you go ahead and just look up Khan's translation, it's different. Anyway, continuing on, I quote, "Sometime after, Aisha narrated, may Allah be pleased with her, the Prophet in his ailment in which he died used to say," ugh, that's terrible writing, "Oh Aisha, I still feel the pain caused by the food I ate at Khaybar, and at this time, I feel as if my aorta is being cut from that poison." Okay. The argument here is, quote, basically, the Quran said if Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is lying, he will certainly have his aorta artery cut. Then, on his deathbed, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, of course, said, "I feel as if my aorta is being cut." Yeah. This argument is incredibly illogical. If God is punishing Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam for making something up, why do it after all the revelations are made? I encourage everyone of any persuasion to look up the actual text this is quoted because it's different than quoted here. Last, but certainly not least, I will confront some of them are questions, others are statements, in the document titled Questions to Ask Muslims, or Ask Yourself if you are a Muslim. The very first is a standard ignorant question about why we are required to worship the Kaaba. Answer: we do not worship the Kaaba. We worship Allah, the God of all. I find this interesting coming from someone who claims a man can be God or a part of God. Next question I should ask myself is, quote, if associating partners with Allah is haram, why is Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam name always with Allah's name? Why is Allah so devoted to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Even when they use tidbits of Islam's theology, Islam's critics use it wrong. Partnership with Allah means something like the Trinity or the concept of God having a mother. Both are partnership because in reality, Christ is worshipped as God in Christianity, and in Catholicism, Mary, may God be pleased with her, is said to be the mother of God. That is partnership. Prophethood is not partnership. Receiving revelations is not a partnership. In fact, there is nothing about Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam that suggests partnership with Allah. Rather, that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was the slave of Allah. I could go on and on for at least an hour with this website, but let's conclude with this little gem. What's the point of praying in a language you do not even understand? Well, if the author is Christian and American, he should definitely not go to Germany for a service or a mass, nor should he go to Mexico, Brazil, Portugal, the Netherlands, France, Italy, Spain, Russia, Croatia, and many more places, because they pray in a different language. That's about the size of the logic here. As someone who converted, Muslims we like to say I reverted, to Islam, I can tell you it's totally fine to do prayers in your native language if you don't know the Arabic. I personally was so gung-ho that I learned the Old Arabic and what it meant at the same time. But there's nothing saying you must know the prayers in the Old Arabic or indeed understand them. Rather, you should understand the Quran in your own language first and foremost. Thus, when our author goes to Germany and hears Vater unser im Himmel, gehalt werde dein Name, he would probably recognize it as the Lord's Prayer. I just said in German, like this is my literal translation of it, Father in the heavens, your name is exalted is your name, basically. Also, by the way, I think Christians would like to note this. The Trinity is not named in that prayer. Why is it not named in the Lord's Prayer if the concept of the Trinity is so essential to salvation? Also, why is there no Jesus is God thing in there? Answer: the concept did not exist at the time that that prayer was made. It seems I've simply gathered more evidence against Christianity than had my own ideas challenged. Stay tuned for our next episode about my conversion, or reversion, to Islam.